History is not a straight line from simple to complex. Our story is written in brilliant flashes of light that appear, vanish, and are sometimes lost for 1,000 years. This is a journey through 30 ancient inventions that defy our assumptions about time. You will see objects of such startling sophistication they seem to belong to a future era, not a distant past. By the end, you will possess a new understanding of human ingenuity and its mysterious, non-linear path. We will examine a 2,000-year-old computer found at the bottom of the sea and a Roman cup that plays tricks with light at the molecular level. Examining these artifacts does more than spark wonder. It forces us to rewrite the narrative of history itself. What does true innovation look like when it arrives centuries too early? It was pulled from the wreckage in pieces, a lump of corroded bronze and wood, to the sponge divers working off the coast of a Greek island in the year 1900. It looked like little more than a shapeless rock, perhaps a bit of nautical debris encrusted by 2 millennia under the sea. This artifact, recovered from the famous Antikythera shipwreck, was catalogued and largely forgotten, a curious footnote to a trove of beautiful statues and pottery. For decades, it sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, an unassuming puzzle no one knew how to solve. Then, researchers began to look closer. Using advanced imaging techniques like X-ray tomography, they peered through the layers of corrosion. What they saw was not a rock but a revelation. Inside were precise, interlocking bronze gears, some with teeth cut at exact angles, arranged in a complex clockwork assembly. This was not debris, it was a machine. A machine of breathtaking sophistication, now known as the Antikythera mechanism. The device, crafted in the 2nd century before the Common Era, was an astronomical calculator. By turning a hand crank on its side, an operator could simulate the complex motions of the heavens. Its dials and pointers could predict the positions of the sun and moon, the phases of our lunar companion, and even the timing of eclipses. Some researchers believe it also tracked the movements of the 5 planets known to the ancient Greeks. This was a portable cosmos, a model of the universe engineered from bronze. Its purpose was likely both scientific and cultural, used for planning agricultural cycles, religious festivals, and simply to demonstrate a profound understanding of celestial order. Yet its very existence creates a profound historical silence. After this device, nothing of comparable mechanical complexity appears in the archaeological record for over 1,000 years. Gears of this precision and purpose vanish from history until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe, so we are left with a haunting question. Who built this, and how did such a luminous spark of engineering genius flicker out, leaving the world to wait more than 10 centuries to see its like again? That machine was a quiet genius of bronze and calculation, a secret of the stars hidden beneath the waves. But the ancient world also produced weapons of war whose secrets were guarded with a ferocity that matched their destructive power. One such invention was not merely a tool, but a form of alchemy turned to defense, a liquid nightmare that decided the fate of empires upon the sea. Its name was Greek fire. For over 700 years, the Byzantine Empire, with its capital at Constantinople, stood as a bastion against countless sieges and naval assaults. One of the most potent pillars of its defense was this legendary substance. Described in historical accounts, it was a thick, sticky liquid that was projected from tubes mounted on the prows of Byzantine warships or even handheld siphons. Upon ignition, it became a torrent of fire that could not be quenched by water. In fact, it was said to burn even more fiercely when it touched the sea, creating a spreading sheet of flame across the waves that would engulf enemy wooden vessels in an inescapable inferno. The only ways to put it out, according to the records, were with sand, strong vinegar, or perhaps by smothering it with old, wet hides. The psychological impact of this weapon cannot be overstated. Imagine being a sailor in a wooden ship, seeing a jet of this unnatural fire arcing toward you, knowing that the very ocean beneath you would become fuel for the blaze. It was a terror weapon of the highest order, and its recipe was the most closely guarded state secret of the Byzantine era. Knowledge of its manufacture was confined to a very small, select group, possibly even a single family. The secret was protected so completely that when the empire finally fell in the 15th century, the exact formula was lost to history. To this day, we do not know its precise chemical composition. Modern chemists have theories suggesting ingredients like crude petroleum, pine resin, quicklime, or saltpeter, creating a substance akin to an early form of napalm. But the original, perfected Byzantine formula, with its unique properties of adhesion and water resistance, remains a mystery. This loss makes Greek fire a different kind of ancient marvel. It was not a device whose complexity we can reverse engineer like the Antikythera mechanism. It is a ghost of chemistry, a reminder that some leaps of practical science were so valuable, so potent, that they could be kept secret for centuries, a technological advantage literally lost in the flames of time. Its legacy is one of sheer, intimidating power, a weapon so far ahead of its time in its tactical and psychological impact that its shadow still flickers in our historical imagination. From a weapon of liquid fire, we move to an object of quiet, puzzling potential. In the basement of the National Museum of Iraq sit a few unremarkable-looking clay jars. They stand about the height of a hand, sealed with asphalt, and inside each one rests a copper cylinder housing an iron rod. Discovered in the 1930s at a site near Baghdad and dated to the Parthian period around 2,000 years ago, these artifacts were catalogued as simple storage vessels. But one researcher looked at the corrosion on the iron rod, the acidic residue inside, and the careful insulation provided by the asphalt stopper, and proposed a radical idea. What if these were not for storing scrolls or spices, but for storing energy? The theory suggests that if the jar was filled with an acidic electrolyte, like vinegar or grape juice, the chemical reaction between the copper and the iron would generate a small electric potential, creating a primitive galvanic cell. A single jar might produce just over 1 volt of electricity, not enough to power a light, but perhaps enough for a subtle, mysterious purpose. One compelling hypothesis is electroplating, the process of using an electric current to bond a thin layer of a precious metal, like gold, onto the surface of a less valuable object. This would explain ancient artifacts found with remarkably fine, even gold coatings that seem difficult to achieve by traditional methods. Another possibility is its use in religious or medicinal spectacle, where the mild shock from such a device could be presented as a divine touch or a mysterious healing force. The very thought is staggering, a whisper of electrical science in an era we associate with chariots and clay tablets. Yet here lies the core of the controversy, and what makes this artifact so emblematic of being ahead of its time. Skeptics offer a far more mundane explanation, that the jars were indeed for storage, perhaps for sacred scrolls, with the iron rod simply acting as a protective core. The acidic residue could be from decomposed organic contents, and the asphalt was just a reliable sealant. The debate itself is the point. There is no definitive proof, no ancient wiring diagram or instruction manual found alongside them. Their true purpose remains locked within the clay, a tantalizing possibility that sits on the razor's edge between brilliant accident and intentional design. Whether they are ancient batteries or simple parts, they force us to confront a profound question. How would we even recognize an ancient experiment with electricity if we saw one? The Baghdad Battery is not a confirmed invention so much as a ghost of a possibility, a shadow on the wall of history that suggests our ancestors might have been playing with forces we thought were centuries beyond their reach. While the Baghdad Battery remains a ghost of possibility, some ancient inventions left behind a legacy of stone and mortar so enduring it still defies our modern engineering. Look at the great monuments of Rome, the Pantheon with its vast, unsupported dome, or the aqueducts marching across the European landscape. For centuries, we assumed their survival was simply a testament to Roman mass and might. But the true secret was in the mix. Roman concrete, known as opus cementitium, was not just durable, it was in many ways superior to what we use today. Modern Portland cement, the backbone of contemporary construction, has a fundamental weakness, especially in marine environments. Salt water seeps into its pores, reacting with compounds inside to create expansive crystals that crack the material from within. This is why so many modern seawalls and piers require constant, costly repair. Now, look at the ancient Roman harbor at Caesarea, built by Herod the Great 2,000 years ago. Its concrete breakwaters were cast directly into the turbulent Mediterranean Sea. While modern counterparts might crumble in decades, these Roman structures have withstood the relentless pounding of waves and salt for millennia. They are not just surviving, they are thriving. The secret was in a special ingredient, a volcanic ash called pozzolana, mined from regions like Pozzuoli near Naples. The Romans mixed this ash with lime and chunks of rock to create their concrete. For a long time, we admired the result but did not fully understand the process. Recent research, however, has unlocked the mystery. The magic of Roman concrete is that it is not a static material. It is a slow, continuous chemical reaction. When seawater percolates through the Roman mix, it dissolves components of the volcanic ash and lime. This initiates the growth of rare, plate-like crystals that fill in any tiny cracks and voids as they form. In essence, the concrete possesses a self-healing property. A crack that appears is not a death sentence. It is an invitation for the material to grow new, interlocking minerals that seal the wound, making the structure even stronger over the centuries. This is the exact opposite of modern concrete, which begins to degrade from the moment it sets. The realization is humbling. The Romans, through empirical mastery rather than modern chemistry, engineered a material that actively fights entropy. Today, material scientists are racing to decode and replicate this ancient alchemy, hoping to create a new generation of self-healing concrete for our own seawalls, bridges, and nuclear containment structures. The most resilient building material of the future, it seems, might be a careful rediscovery of a 2,000-year-old past. A material that repairs itself is a marvel of passive intelligence, but what about an object that extends human vision itself? In the ruins of the ancient Assyrian palace at Nimrud, archaeologists uncovered a small, unassuming artifact made of rock crystal. It is roughly 3,000 years old, meticulously ground into an oval shape with one flat side and one gently convex side. This is the Nimrud lens. When held, it feels cool and substantial in the palm, a polished window into a distant past, but when you look through it, something remarkable happens. The crystal has clear optical properties. It can magnify small objects, bringing fine details into sharper focus. It can also concentrate rays of sunlight into a single, intense point of heat. On its own, it is a simple, beautiful piece of craftsmanship, yet its very existence in that time and place sparks a cascade of questions about how it was used and why its potential seems to have been a road not taken. What could the Assyrians, a civilization renowned for intricate ivory carvings and detailed seal engravings, have done with such a tool? One compelling theory is that it served as a magnifying lens for master artisans. Imagine a craftsman working on a tiny, delicate piece of ivory, using this lens to see details invisible to the naked eye, allowing for the breathtaking precision seen in surviving artifacts. Another practical use would be as a burning glass, a tool to concentrate the sun's rays to start a fire or perhaps for some specialized crafting process. But there is a more tantalizing possibility. Could it have been an early astronomical sighting tool, a lens that could bring the faint pinpricks of stars into slightly sharper view, helping early astronomers map the heavens? The evidence is circumstantial, but the potential is profound. This is where the mystery deepens and the question of being ahead of its time becomes poignant. We know the ancient Greeks wrote about the basic principles of optics, yet for over a millennium after the Nimrud lens was crafted, the technology for corrective vision, for eyeglasses that could transform the lives of millions, remained undiscovered. Why, it seems the conceptual leap from a tool for magnification or fire starting to a device worn on the face to correct a personal impairment was a vast one. The lens existed, but the application for common, individual need did not follow. It remained a specialized object, perhaps a curiosity or a tool of the elite, its broader implications locked within its crystalline structure. So the Nimrud lens stands as a quiet monument to a path not fully explored. It is proof that the basic component for a world-changing technology was physically present in the ancient world, held in someone's hand, bending light to their will. Yet the society that made it never took the next obvious step to bring that clarity to every aging scholar or artisan. It is a whisper of an alternate history where eyeglasses could have been invented 1,000 years earlier, a single, polished crystal hinting at a future that waited centuries to arrive. This manipulation of light was not confined to a single polished lens. In the hands of Roman glassmakers, it became a spectacle of color that seemed to defy the very nature of matter. The Lycurgus Cup is a masterpiece of this craft, a stunning cage cup from the 4th century. At first glance, it appears a murky jade green, a beautiful but seemingly opaque vessel. But hold it up to a light source, let the light pass through it, and a magic trick occurs. The entire cup transforms, glowing a deep, translucent blood red. This is not a painted effect or a trick of the eye. It is a permanent physical property of the glass itself, a secret locked within its molecular structure for over 1,600 years. For centuries, how the Roman artisans achieved this chameleon-like effect was a complete mystery. The answer, when it was finally uncovered with modern electron microscopy, was nothing short of astonishing. The glass contains infinitesimal amounts of gold and silver, but not as flakes or flecks. These metals were ground and mixed into the molten glass with such incredible fineness that they exist as nanoparticles, particles so small they are measured in billionths of a meter. At this scale, matter behaves in strange and wonderful ways. These nanoparticles interact with light in a process called plasmon resonance. Simply put, when light hits these tiny metal particles, their electrons vibrate in a specific way. The color we see depends on the angle and type of light. Light reflected off the surface makes the cup look green, while light passing through the particles makes it glow red. This is not a one-off accident. Other examples of similar Roman glass, known as dichroic glass, have been found, proving this was a reproducible technique. They had no concept of nanotechnology, no electron microscopes to see what they were doing. Yet, through relentless experimentation and masterful control of their materials, they were manipulating matter at a scale we only began to understand in the 20th century. The cup is more than a beautiful artifact. It is a testament to an empirical science so advanced it borders on alchemy. They were playing with the building blocks of light and color, achieving an effect so precise and deliberate that it feels less like ancient craft and more like a piece of the future preserved in glass. That mastery of glass suggests a society comfortable with complex processes, but some ancient artifacts defy process altogether because they stand utterly alone. On the sun-baked island of Crete, within the ruins of the Minoan palace of Phaistos, archaeologists in 1908 uncovered a small, round tablet of fired clay. It is known as the Phaistos disc. At first glance, it seems like a simple record, perhaps an inventory or a prayer. But a closer look reveals a puzzle that has stubbornly resisted solution for over a century. Both sides of the disc are covered, from the outer edge spiraling inward, with a sequence of tiny, intricate symbols. There are human figures, birds, fish, plants, and geometric shapes, all rendered with a crisp, formal clarity. These are not scratched or drawn by hand. Each symbol was pressed into the soft clay with its own individual seal, a separate stamp. This is the crucial revolutionary detail. The maker of this disc possessed a set of pre-formed type, a library of symbols that could be arranged and impressed in a specific order to convey a message. In essence, this is a form of movable type printing, a technology we associate with Gutenberg and the 15th century, appearing here in the Bronze Age over 3,000 years earlier. And then the mystery deepens into silence. No other object like it has ever been found. Not in the ruins of Phaistos, not anywhere else in the Minoan world, not in any other contemporary civilization. The set of seals used to create it has vanished. The script itself, comprising 45 distinct signs, remains completely undeciphered. We do not know if it represents a language, a syllabic system, or a set of religious or administrative codes. It is a single, brilliant day to point with no connecting line to anything before or after. So what are we to make of it? Was it the proud invention of a lone artisan, a prototype for a system of communication that never caught on? Could it have been a diplomatic message from a far-off land, using a script unknown even to the Minoans who received it? Or was it a sacred object, a one-of-a-kind ritual artifact whose meaning was meant to be esoteric and self-contained? The Phaistos disc offers no answers, only the profound quiet of its isolation. It is a technological ghost, a whisper of an idea, the idea of reproducible stamped text, that flashed into existence and then vanished for millennia, leaving behind only this one clay circle as proof that someone, long ago, had a thought centuries ahead of its time. A single, silent artifact can speak of a lost idea, but what about a machine designed to speak for the Earth itself? In the year 132 of the Common Era, in the court of China's Han Dynasty, a scholar and inventor named Zhang Heng presented the emperor with a magnificent object. It was a large, ornate bronze vessel, nearly 6 feet across, resplendent with carvings of mountains and streams. But its most striking features were the 8 dragons spaced evenly around its upper rim, each one gazing downward with a bronze ball held delicately in its jaws. Below each dragon sat a waiting bronze toad, its mouth open in anticipation. This was not a ceremonial fountain or a simple clock. It was the world's first seismoscope, a device built to detect the unseen tremors of a distant earthquake. The concept was as elegant as it was revolutionary. According to historical records, when an earthquake occurred even hundreds of miles away, the directional force of the seismic waves would travel through the earth. Inside the vessel, an ingenious but now lost mechanism, likely a carefully balanced pendulum or inverted mass, would be disturbed by these subtle vibrations. The mechanism was linked to the dragons. The tremor from a specific direction would trigger just one dragon, causing it to release its bronze ball. The ball would clatter down, landing with a resonant ring in the mouth of the toad below, announcing not only that an earthquake had happened, but precisely from which cardinal direction it had originated. Imagine the awe in the court when, on one occasion, a dragon released its ball, though no local shaking was felt. Days later, a messenger arrived from a region far to the west, reporting a devastating quake. The device had sensed it, providing a vital alert long before human messengers could arrive. The true genius of Zhang Heng's invention lies in its core principle, remote sensing. It was designed to interpret a complex, invisible force of nature and translate it into a simple, unambiguous signal. The exact engineering inside the bronze vessel remains a subject of scholarly debate, as the original was lost to history. Yet modern reconstructions based on the descriptions have proven the concept sound. A pendulum suspended in the center, surrounded by cleverly arranged levers, could indeed be sensitive enough to trigger a release mechanism in just one direction. This places the device centuries ahead of any comparable instrument in the West. For over 1,500 years, it stood alone as a masterpiece of geophysical intuition, a bronze oracle that gave the Earth itself a voice. While the bronze seismoscope listened for the whispers of the earth, another civilization mastered a tool to read the hidden language of the sky. For the Vikings, the open ocean was not a barrier but a highway, and their legendary voyages from Scandinavia to North America are a feat that still inspires awe. They sailed without magnetic compasses, crossing vast, featureless stretches of the North Atlantic under skies often shrouded by cloud and fog. How did they do it? The Norse sagas speak of a mysterious aid called the solarstein, the sunstone. This was not a mythical object of fantasy, but a practical tool referenced in tales of navigation. For centuries, its nature was a mystery until researchers began to suspect it was a crystal, specifically a type of calcite known as Iceland spar. This clear, rhomboid-shaped crystal possesses a remarkable optical property called birefringence, or double refraction. When you look through a piece of Iceland spar at a light source, you see two images. The key is that the intensity of these twin images changes depending on the crystal's orientation relative to the polarized light scattered by the sun, even when the sun itself is completely obscured by cloud. A skilled navigator could hold the stone up to the sky and slowly rotate it. By finding the angle where the two images inside the crystal matched in brightness, they could pinpoint the exact azimuth of the hidden sun with startling accuracy, even at twilight. This gave them a fixed celestial reference point, a way to find true north when neither the sun nor the stars were visible. For a long time, this was a compelling theory based on physics and folklore. Then, modern scientists put it to the test. In one landmark experiment, a team used a crystal of Iceland spar as the sole navigational tool on an overcast day. Following the procedure deduced from the sagas, they were able to determine the sun's position with an error of less than 1 degree. This level of precision is more than enough for successful ocean navigation. The implications are profound. It means the Vikings possessed not just courage and shipbuilding skill, but a sophisticated understanding of light itself. They harnessed a subtle property of physics, using a natural crystal as a sophisticated optical sensor centuries before the principles of polarization were formally described. The sunstone transforms their voyages from tales of brute force endurance into stories of brilliant empirical science. It was a key that unlocked the gray, clouded skies, turning them into a readable map and guiding their longships to shores a world away. The sunstone was a tool of subtle physics, a crystal compass for reading a hidden sky. But what happens when an artifact appears not just ahead of its time, but seemingly outside of time altogether? In the winter of 1961, 3 rockhounds were searching for geodes near the town of Olancha, California, in the Coso Mountains. They cracked open what seemed a promising, lumpy stone, expecting the beautiful crystal-lined cavity typical of a geode. Instead, they found something that made no geological sense whatsoever. Inside the hardened mineral shell was a rigid, cylindrical object. It had a ceramic core surrounded by a hexagonal metal collar with a 2mm metal shaft down its center. To anyone with even a passing familiarity with 20th century machinery, it looked unmistakably like a modern spark plug. The mystery, however, was the thick, hard casing of clay, pebbles, and fossil shells that encased it. The discoverers claimed this concretion had taken an immense amount of time to form, perhaps 500,000 years. The implications were staggering. Here was a manufactured mechanical object, apparently sealed inside a mineral nodule that predated modern humans by hundreds of millennia. Was it evidence of a lost, advanced civilization? A visitor from another world, or a time traveler's careless litter? The artifact, quickly dubbed the Coso Artifact, became a sensation among those fascinated by out-of-place artifacts, or OOPArts. These are objects that appear in archaeological or geological contexts that contradict conventional historical timelines, sparking endless debate and wonder. For decades, the Coso Artifact stood as a classic, bewildering example. The path to solving this mystery, however, is a masterclass in how careful investigation separates romantic speculation from historical fact. In the early 2000s, investigators took the artifact to be professionally examined. Using modern X-ray technology, they got a far clearer view of the internal object than the original discoverers ever could. The X-rays revealed details invisible from the outside, including a small, corroded spring, a copper sleeve, and a threaded end. These were the definitive fingerprints of a specific era of engineering. Collectors of early automotive parts identified it almost immediately. It was not a mysterious relic of deep time. It was a champion spark plug from the 1920s, a model commonly used in Ford Model T and Model A engines. The so-called geode was not a primordial formation at all, but a concretion of hardened rust known as a desert varnish or ferrous oxide concretion that can form with surprising speed around a metal object in the right mineral-rich, wet-dry cycling environment. A spark plug lost by a prospector or motorist decades earlier could have been encased in such a manner, creating a perfect illusion of immense antiquity. The case was closed, a neat debunking, yet the story of the Coso artifact remains profoundly valuable, not as proof of ancient astronauts, but as a window into why we are so captivated by these anomalies. OOPArts like this one, even the debunked ones, serve a crucial purpose. They are pressure tests for our established narratives. They force us to look harder, to question our assumptions, and to refine our methods. They represent the thrilling human desire for mystery, for a history that is stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. And sometimes the real discovery is not a rewriting of history, but a deeper appreciation for the rigorous, patient work it takes to understand the true story written in stone and in rust. The spark plug was a mirage of mystery, but some ancient inventions present a different kind of enigma, one not of mistaken identity but of lost potential. In the 1st century of the Common Era, in the Great Library and Museum of Alexandria, a brilliant engineer and mathematician named Hero described and likely built a device of startling simplicity and power. It was called an aeolipile or Hero's engine. Picture a hollow metal sphere mounted so it could rotate freely between two pipes. These pipes channeled steam from a sealed cauldron of boiling water up into the sphere. Two more pipes bent into L shapes jutted out from opposite sides of the sphere. As the steam rushed into the sphere and escaped through these bent nozzles, the reactive force of the jets caused the entire sphere to spin, whirling with surprising speed and force. This was not just a curious toy. It was a working steam turbine, a clear demonstration of the principle of action and reaction that would, centuries later, become a cornerstone of Newtonian physics and modern engineering. Hero understood the physics at play. In his writings, he classified the device under the study of pneumatics, the properties of air and steam. He and his contemporaries saw it for what it was, a marvelous demonstration of natural principles. And there it stopped. The aeolipile remained a demonstration, a temple wonder, perhaps used to animate small statues or to awe visitors to the museum. It was never connected to a wheel, a pump, or a mill. The Greeks possessed all the basic components for a transformative technology: the sealed boiler, the turbine, the understanding of force. They had metallurgy capable of crafting it, yet the conceptual leap from philosophical toy to practical engine was one they never made. The social and economic landscape offered no impetus. Slave labor was abundant and cheap, eliminating a major driver for labor-saving machinery. There was no burgeoning industrial class demanding more efficient production, no network of mines desperate to pump out water, no vision of locomotives or steamships. The engine existed in a vacuum of application. This is perhaps one of the most profound what-if scenarios in the history of technology. The seeds of the Industrial Revolution, which would reshape the world nearly 1800 years later, were present in Alexandria. They were held in the hands of thinkers who could see the power, but whose society lacked the need, the ambition, or the vision to harness it for work. The aeolipile spins in history as a ghost of a future that waited millennia to arrive, a brilliant answer to a question its own world never thought to ask. The steam engine was a marvel without a purpose, but another ancient technology was forged with a single, deadly intent. In the hands of a skilled warrior, a Damascus steel blade was more than a weapon, it was a masterpiece of metallurgy. These legendary swords, originating in the medieval Near East, were celebrated across continents for their almost supernatural qualities. They were said to be strong enough to split a falling silk scarf in midair, yet flexible enough to bend without breaking. Their most striking feature was the mesmerizing, watery pattern on their surface, a swirling, wavy design that seemed to flow like liquid metal frozen in time. This beauty was not mere decoration, it was the visible signature of a metal structure so complex it would not be fully understood for 1,000 years. The journey of such a blade began far from the forges of Damascus. Its raw material was a special type of high-carbon steel ingot known as woot steel, produced in ancient India. These ingots were traded across the world, prized for their purity. In the workshops of Syrian swordsmiths, the true magic happened. Through a closely guarded process of repeated heating, folding, and most critically, a very specific cycle of cooling, the smiths transformed the steel. They were not just shaping the metal, they were orchestrating its inner architecture at a level invisible to the eye. Modern materials scientists, using electron microscopes to examine surviving fragments of these ancient blades, made a breathtaking discovery. Within that swirling pattern lay a hidden forest of nanostructures. The steel contained carbon nanotubes, incredibly strong cylindrical molecules, alongside nanowires of a hard iron-carbon compound called cementite. These microscopic structures formed spontaneously during the ancient forging process, creating a composite material that was both incredibly hard at the edge for sharpness and remarkably tough and flexible in the body to absorb impact. The smiths of old had no concept of nanotechnology, yet through empirical mastery of fire, hammer, and timing, they were building it into every sword. This knowledge, passed down through generations in guilds and families, was a profound secret. Then, around the middle of the 18th century, the technique vanished. The exact recipes for the woot's ingots, the precise temperatures, the cooling rates, the very rhythm of the hammer strikes, all were lost, perhaps due to disrupted trade routes, the passing of master smiths without heirs, or the changing nature of warfare. For centuries, the blades that remained became priceless relics, their secrets locked within their gleaming, patterned surfaces. Today, reproducing true Damascus steel is one of the holy grails of metallurgy. Modern blacksmiths and scientists can create beautiful pattern-welded steel, often called Damascus today, which involves forge welding different alloys together. But recreating the authentic, nanostructure-rich woots-based steel with all its legendary properties remains an immense challenge. We can analyze what they achieved, but we still cannot perfectly replicate how they did it. The story of Damascus steel, therefore, is not just one of lost technique. It is a story of how a deep, intuitive understanding of a material could achieve results that our own age, with all its analytical power, still struggles to match. It represents a pinnacle of craft that was, quite literally, forged centuries ahead of its time. A Damascus steel blade is a permanent record of physical mastery, its secrets written in nanostructures and swirling patterns. But what about a civilization that chose not to write its records on stone or clay at all, but to weave them into strings? High in the Andes, the Inca Empire, the largest in pre-Columbian America, governed a vast and diverse territory stretching thousands of miles without a system of writing as we know it. They had no alphabet, no parchment scrolls, no clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform. Instead, their entire administrative apparatus, their censuses, their treasury records, their historical chronicles, depended on an astonishingly elegant and complex device, the quipu. A quipu, at first glance, looks deceptively simple. It is a collection of colored cords typically made from cotton or camelid wool like alpaca, hanging from a main horizontal strand. Some cords have subsidiary cords hanging from them in turn, creating a cascading, three-dimensional structure, but look closer and you see the language. The information is stored in a code of knots, the type of knot, its position along the cord, the spacing between knots, the color of the cord itself, the direction of the twist in the string, and even the material it was made from. All of these elements carried specific, meaningful data. This was not a simple memory aid for a single storyteller. It was a sophisticated, standardized data storage and retrieval system operated by a specialized class of record keepers known as quipu. Through this system, the central government in Cusco could track the immense wealth and labor of the empire. A quipu could record the population of a province, the contents of storehouses, the output of agricultural terraces, the number of llamas in a herd, or the tribute owed by a community. The position of a knot might represent a place, its color a type of commodity, and the knot type a numerical value using a base 10 positional system remarkably similar to our own. A figure 8 knot represented 1, a long knot with a specific number of turns could represent 2 through 9, and a single overhand knot stood for a multiple of 10, 100, or 1,000 depending on its placement. The true mystery and the source of ongoing research is whether the quipu could encode more than numbers. Could it also record narratives, stories, or laws? Some scholars point to colonial Spanish accounts that describe quipus being read to recount histories and genealogies. The complex combinations of color, material, and structure suggest a symbolic depth that may have moved beyond pure accounting into the realm of a true non-written language, a tactile literature of knots. This possibility transforms the quipu from an ancient spreadsheet into something far more profound, a unique form of human expression, a language spun from fiber rather than ink. Its legacy, however, is shadowed by fragility. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived, they systematically destroyed thousands of quipus, seeing them as idolatrous objects or simply failing to recognize their significance as records. Only about 600 are known to survive today, and with the passing of the quipu, the full cipher to unlock their stories was largely lost. We can decode their numbers, but their potential poems and histories remain silent, a vast library of knowledge waiting in knotted cords, a testament to a civilization that found a brilliantly different way to speak to the future. The quipu's silent language of knots was a peaceful system of order, yet the ancient world also tells tales of harnessing nature for pure, focused destruction. One of the most enduring legends of military ingenuity comes from the siege of Syracuse in the 3rd century before the Common Era. As the story goes, the brilliant mathematician and engineer Archimedes, tasked with defending his city from a massive Roman fleet, devised a terrifying weapon. He is said to have arranged a series of highly polished bronze shields, acting as mirrors along the city walls. At his command, these shields were angled to catch the Mediterranean sun and reflect its rays onto the wooden hulls of the approaching Roman ships. The concentrated beam of sunlight, focused to a single, searing point, supposedly generated enough heat to ignite the vessels from a distance, setting the fleet ablaze and repelling the invasion. It is a dramatic image, the genius of geometry turning sunlight itself into a weapon of war. The historical sources for this event, however, are not contemporary. They were written centuries later by authors like Lucian and Galen, who treated it more as a legendary demonstration of Archimedes' brilliance than a documented military report. This distance in time places the heat ray squarely in the realm of debated legend. Could it have worked? The question has fascinated scientists and historians for generations, turning the story into a perfect test of ancient possibility. Modern attempts to replicate the feat have produced famously mixed results. In the 1970s, a Greek engineer used 70 copper-coated mirrors to set fire to a wooden model of a ship from a short distance away, suggesting the concept was physically plausible under ideal, controlled conditions. Other experiments, however, have struggled. They point to the immense practical challenges. The Roman ships would have been moving on choppy water. Their hulls were often coated with wet pitch or tar for waterproofing, and maintaining the precise, steady alignment of hundreds of large, heavy shields against a moving target would have been a monumental feat of coordination. The consensus among many historians is that if such a device was used at Syracuse, it was likely more for intimidation, to dazzle and disorient crews with a blinding glare, than a reliable incendiary weapon. Yet to dismiss the story entirely is to miss its deeper significance. Whether historical fact or embellished legend, the tale of Archimedes' heat ray represents something profound, an early conceptual exploration of concentrated solar power. It shows a mind looking at the sun, the most abundant energy source on the planet, and asking a revolutionary question: what if we could gather its diffuse light and focus it into a tool of immense power? That leap of imagination, that proto-engineering principle of using reflective geometry to harness solar energy, is the true legacy of the legend. It is a spark of an idea, a blueprint for a technology that would lie dormant for 2,000 years before being revived in modern solar towers and concentrators. The burning ships may belong to myth, but the fundamental insight that sunlight can be commanded shines through the centuries as a testament to a mind thinking centuries ahead of its time. While legends speak of harnessing fire from the sun, another ancient artifact has withstood a far more relentless force, not for moments but for 16 centuries. In the heart of Delhi, India, stands a 7-meter-tall sentinel of iron, known simply as the Iron Pillar. Forged in the 4th century, it has endured over 1,600 monsoons, baking heat and the humid air of a modern metropolis. Yet, against all expectation, its surface remains smooth and almost entirely free of the thick, flaking rust that consumes modern iron structures in mere decades. This is not a story of supernatural preservation, but of profound metallurgical insight. The pillar's resilience is a direct result of its unique chemical composition and the skilled hands that shaped it. Ancient Indian smiths, using a direct reduction process in bloomery furnaces, created an iron with an unusually high phosphorus content and a very low sulfur and manganese content. This specific recipe, combined with the intensive hammering and forging of the hot metal, encouraged the formation of a thin, protective layer on the surface. This layer, known as a passive film, is a blend of iron oxides and phosphates that adheres tightly to the metal beneath, forming a stable, protective barrier against moisture and oxygen. It is a self-maintaining shield, one that actually grows stronger and more protective with time as it interacts with the environment. Modern wrought iron, by comparison, lacks this precise chemical balance and would have shown significant corrosion in the same conditions. The true marvel is that these craftsmen achieved this through empirical mastery, not modern chemistry. They could not measure phosphorus percentages, but through generations of observation and practice, they learned that iron from certain ores, worked in a certain way, produced a superior, long-lasting material. They were, in essence, programming the metal's future behavior at the atomic level. Today, the pillar is more than a monument. It is a living lesson in materials science, a testament to an ancient understanding of durability, so advanced it continues to protect its creation long after the civilization that made it has passed into history. That pillar stands as a monument to durability, a testament to mastering materials for the ages. But what about mastering an environment for the comfort of the moment? For the ancient Greeks and Romans, luxury was not merely about opulent decoration. It was about controlling the very climate of a space. In the chilly winters of the Mediterranean, they developed a system of interior heating so effective, so ingeniously simple, that its core principle still warms our homes today. This was the hypocaust. The word itself comes from the Greek for underburned, and that is the secret of its design. At its heart was a furnace, the prefurnium, often stoked by slaves or servants with a constant supply of wood or charcoal. But this fire did not heat a room directly. Instead, it was the starting point for a brilliant manipulation of air and heat. The furnace was built slightly lower than the floor of the room to be heated. Above the fire, a hollow space was created by raising the floor of the room on a grid of short, sturdy brick pillars called pili. These pillars supported the floor tiles, creating a hidden, flat chamber beneath the entire room. From the furnace, the hot air and gases would flow into this subfloor chamber, slowly radiating their heat upward through the tiles, but the system did not stop there. Clay box tiles called tubuli were also built into the walls, creating vertical flues that connected to the space under the floor. The hot air, always seeking to rise, would travel up through these wall cavities as well, heating the plaster and stone from the inside out before finally escaping through vents in the roof. The result was a gentle, even, radiant heat that permeated the entire space. There were no cold spots, no smoky drafts from an open fire in the center of the room. The floors were pleasantly warm to the touch, and the walls themselves gave off a consistent, comforting warmth. This was not just for modest villas, it was the engineering backbone of the vast Roman public bath complexes, like the famous baths of Caracalla, where thousands of citizens could socialize in luxurious, climate-controlled comfort year-round. The sophistication here is profound. This was a clear, intentional application of thermodynamic principles, understanding that heat rises and that mass, like tile and stone, can absorb and radiate warmth efficiently. It was a fully integrated central heating system, with a single heat source servicing multiple rooms through a designed network of airways. When you walk into a modern home with radiant floor heating, where warm water circulates through pipes under the flooring, you are experiencing the direct technological descendant of the hypocaust. They replaced hot air with hot water and brick with modern piping, but the fundamental idea, the concept of heating a space by warming the surfaces you live on and within, is identical. It is a 2,000-year-old solution to a very human desire for comfort, a quiet, invisible luxury that demonstrates how advanced the engineering for everyday life truly was. The hypocaust warmed a civilization from the ground up, a triumph of environmental control. Yet a small, silent artifact from another ancient culture seems to reach for a different kind of control altogether, not of the earth but of the sky itself. In the late 19th century, archaeologists working in a burial complex near Saqqara, Egypt, uncovered a curious object, carved from sycamore wood and dated to around 200 years before the Common Era. It is known simply as the Saqqara bird. At first glance, it appears to be a stylized bird figurine, sleek and smooth, with a simple head and eyes painted on. But a closer look reveals a design that has sparked a debate lasting over a century. Unlike a natural bird, this artifact has a distinct, straight, vertical tail fin. Its wings are not rounded or flared for flapping, but are carefully shaped with a pronounced downward angle, a feature known as a dihedral that is common in modern aircraft for lateral stability. The overall shape is startlingly aerodynamic to some researchers, particularly those interested in the history of flight. These are not random artistic choices. They propose that the Saqqara bird's design demonstrates an intuitive, perhaps even tested, understanding of principles that would not be formally defined until the age of the Wright brothers. The vertical tail fin acts as a rudder for directional stability. The angled wings could generate lift if the model were launched into a glide. One aviation historian even constructed a scaled-up, weighted replica and reported that it performed remarkably well as a glider when thrown. Could this have been a model for a larger, manned gliding craft, a secret experiment lost to time? Or perhaps it was a ceremonial object, a symbolic representation of flight meant for a religious context, its shape inspired by observation of birds in flight but refined into something more mechanically suggestive. The mainstream view within Egyptology, however, offers a far more grounded interpretation. To most scholars, the Saqqara bird is exactly what it appears to be, a stylized representation of a falcon, a bird deeply associated with the god Horus. The vertical tail could simply be a stylized bird's tail or a stand to keep the figure upright. It might have been a child's toy, a wind vane for a noble's boat, or a decorative piece with no engineering intent whatsoever. The controversy itself is what makes the artifact so compelling. It sits at the intersection of empirical observation and artistic license. Ancient Egyptians were master observers of nature, and their art often captured the essence of a creature's form. Did a particularly observant artisan, watching a bird soar on thermal currents, unconsciously carve the principles of that flight into wood? Or was there a more deliberate attempt to capture and perhaps replicate the mechanics of lift? We may never know for certain. The Saqqara bird does not come with a manual. It offers no context of other similar flying models or texts describing flight experiments. It is a solitary data point, a whisper on the wind, yet its very existence challenges us to look at ancient ingenuity not just in terms of what they built, but in terms of what they observed and imagined. It asks us whether the dream of flight and the first clumsy sketches of its mechanics might be far older than we ever presumed. The dream of flight is a whisper on the wind, but the reality of ancient warfare often descended into the dark and the subterranean. In the year 256, at the frontier city of Dura Europos on the banks of the Euphrates River, a desperate siege was underway. Persian forces of the Sasanian Empire were tunneling beneath the city's formidable walls, a classic tactic to undermine the defenses and bring them crashing down. The Roman garrison inside, aware of the threat, did a daring thing. They began digging their own countermine, a tunnel intended to intercept the Persian diggers deep underground. What happened next in that claustrophobic, pitch-black space was not a simple clash of swords. It was something far more calculated and chilling. Centuries later, archaeologists excavating the site would uncover the grim evidence. At the junction of the two tunnels, they found the remains of at least 19 Roman soldiers and 1 Persian soldier, piled together in a final, silent struggle. The scene was a puzzle. These men had not been crushed by a collapse or killed in hand-to-hand combat in such a confined space. Forensic archaeology provided the shocking answer. On the tunnel walls and on the remains themselves, researchers identified traces of bitumen and sulfur crystals. Bitumen is a thick, flammable tar, and sulfur, when burned, produces a dense, toxic gas, sulfur dioxide. The Romans, it appears, had prepared a trap. As they broke into the Persian tunnel, they ignited a mixture of these substances, creating a billowing cloud of poisonous fumes in the enclosed, oxygen-poor environment. The effect would have been swift and horrific. Sulfur dioxide is a severe irritant. When inhaled, it reacts with moisture in the lungs and airways to form sulfuric acid, causing burning, suffocation, and a rapid, agonizing collapse. The Roman soldiers, likely wearing some form of protective cloth over their faces or perhaps positioned upwind in the tunnel draft, may have hoped to retreat quickly. But the gas was unforgiving, filling the narrow space too fast, claiming attackers and defenders alike in a shared, asphyxiating fate. This incident at Dura Europos is not merely a tragic footnote of siege warfare. It represents a deliberate, sophisticated application of chemical knowledge in battle. The Roman engineers did not stumble upon this effect by accident. They knew the properties of sulfur and bitumen, understood combustion, and weaponized the chemical reaction with brutal intent. This was not Greek fire, a terror weapon of flame, but something more insidious and controlled, a gas attack in a contained space over 1600 years before the horrors of the First World War. It reframes our understanding of ancient combat, revealing a layer of tactical ingenuity that was as calculating as it was devastating. The tunnel stands as a silent, archaeological testament to a moment when the dark science of chemistry was harnessed not for creation, but for silent, subterranean annihilation. The silent, gas-filled tunnels of Dora Europos speak of a grim, tactical science, a calculated use of chemistry in the dark. But not every artifact found in the earth reveals a hidden truth of ancient warfare. Some, in fact, tell a story not of the past, but of the era in which they were made, a story of longing and mystery. Among the most captivating of these are the crystal skulls. These are human skulls carved from single blocks of clear or milky quartz, most famously the Mitchell-Hedges skull, named for its adventurer discoverer in the early 20th century. With its haunting, lifelike detail and jaw that moves independently, it was presented as a pre-Columbian masterpiece, a relic of lost Mesoamerican civilizations like the Maya or Aztec. The story told was one of unimaginable patience and skill, requiring generations of artisans to painstakingly grind the impossibly hard quartz with sand and water, a process that would have taken not years but centuries. It became an icon of the mysterious and the occult, a symbol of ancient esoteric knowledge. For decades, the skulls captivated the public imagination, featured in films and books as artifacts of power. They seemed to be the ultimate out-of-place artifact, objects of such technical perfection they defied the known capabilities of their supposed time. Then science looked closer. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, researchers subjected several of the most famous crystal skulls, including the Mitchell-Hedges skull, to rigorous forensic analysis using high-powered microscopes. What they found was not the story of sand and endless time, but the unmistakable signature of modern industry. The surfaces of the skulls revealed microscopic parallel grooves and marks consistent with the high-speed rotary wheels and diamond-tipped drills used in 19th-century European jewelry workshops. These are tool marks that simply could not have been made by the hand-powered, abrasive techniques available to pre-Columbian carvers. Further analysis of the quartz itself sometimes pointed to sources like Brazil or Madagascar, regions with no known trade links to ancient Mesoamerica. The evidence was conclusive. The most celebrated crystal skulls were not ancient relics at all, but sophisticated works of lapidary art created in the 1800s or early 1900s, likely in Germany or France. They were products of their own time, not a lost one. This revelation might seem to diminish the skulls, to strip them of their magic, but in a profound way it makes them even more fascinating. The crystal skulls are a perfect case study in how our desire for mystery can shape history. They were not hoaxes in the simple sense of a forgery made to fool a museum for money, though that may have been a motive for some. They became something larger, cultural inventions that filled a deep need for wonder, for a tangible connection to a romanticized, enigmatic past. Their debunking is not the end of the story, but a crucial chapter in the historical detective process. It reminds us that the quest to understand the past is a dialogue between discovery and scrutiny, between the artifact and the toolmark. It shows that sometimes the most compelling history an object holds is the story of why we wanted so badly for it to be true. The skulls, in their gleaming, manufactured perfection, are ultimately mirrors reflecting not ancient gods, but our own timeless fascination with the unexplained. The gleaming perfection of a crystal skull reflects our own desire for wonder, but in the ash-preserved ruins of Pompeii, we find a different kind of reflection, one not of mystery but of stark, practical reality. Among the haunting casts of those who perished, archaeologists uncovered a collection of tools that speak not of the occult, but of the body, and of a medical science far more advanced than we often assume. These are Roman surgical instruments, and they are not crude implements of guesswork. They are a complete, specialized toolkit, a surgeon's kit for a world that understood anatomy and procedure. The array is both familiar and startling. There are finely balanced steel scalpels with replaceable blades, delicate hooks for retracting tissue, and slender probes for exploration. There are bone drills called trepans for relieving pressure on the brain, and bone forceps with sharp, interlocking teeth for extracting fragments. There are catheters, both male and female, crafted from bronze, demonstrating an understanding of internal blockages. But one instrument stands out for its sheer, unchanged ingenuity, the vaginal speculum. Recovered from the ruins, its design is almost unnervingly modern. It consists of a screw mechanism that, when turned, smoothly opens two hinged blades, allowing for a clear internal examination. The principle is identical to the speculum used in gynecological offices today, a tool for diagnosis that prioritizes both visibility and patient care. This single object dismantles a common misconception. It proves that Roman medicine was not merely about herbal remedies and battlefield amputations. It was a systematized, sophisticated discipline with specialized tools for specialized tasks, grounded in observation and a practical need to intervene. The presence of such an array suggests trained surgeons, likely with knowledge from the great medical school at Alexandria, who understood the value of precision and sterility, boiling their instruments before use. Yet this advanced toolkit, like so many Roman innovations, faded into history. With the empire's fragmentation and the shift in medical scholarship, this level of specialized surgical practice would not re-emerge in Europe for well over 1,000 years. The Dark Ages of medicine were, in part, a forgetting of tools already invented, their elegant forms lying buried in volcanic ash, waiting for a future that had to rediscover what the past had already perfected. The tools of the surgeon spoke of a science grounded in the visible, physical world. But on the walls of a dark Egyptian temple chamber, a different kind of image has sparked a debate that stretches across the chasm between ancient symbolism and modern imagination. In the crypt of the Hathor Temple at Dendera, a series of intricate stone reliefs have been carved into the walls for over 2,000 years. One panel in particular has become the center of intense speculation. It shows a large, elongated object shaped somewhat like a glass bulb. Inside this bulb, a snake stretches its body in a straight line, its head touching the tip of a lotus flower that seems to be held by a supporting arm. A cord or cable appears to run from the base of this object to a box, upon which a baboon-like god sits. To a modern eye, conditioned by a world of electricity, the resemblance is startling. It looks for all the world like a depiction of an electric light bulb. The snake becomes the glowing filament, the lotus flower the socket, the bulb's shape the glass enclosure, and the box a power source or battery. This interpretation, popularized in certain alternative history circles, suggests the ancient Egyptians possessed knowledge of electric lighting, a technology lost for millennia. The image, often called the Dendera Light, seems to be a perfect candidate for our list, a clear-cut case of an invention centuries ahead of its time. But the true story, as explained by Egyptologists who have studied the temple's full iconographic program, is both more complex and more fascinating. The relief is not an isolated technical diagram. It is part of a dense, symbolic narrative. The orthodox interpretation identifies the scene as a representation of a creation myth. The snake is not a filament but a manifestation of the god Harsomptus, a form of the deity Horus. It is shown being born from a lotus flower, which in Egyptian mythology represents creation and rebirth, emerging from the primordial waters. The large, bulb-shaped enclosure is not glass, but a protective shrine or a representation of the cosmic egg from which life emerges. The supporting arm belongs to the god Her, a deity of eternity, and the baboon on the box is a form of the god Thoth. The entire tableau is a spiritual allegory for the moment of creation, the emergence of divine life and light from the darkness of chaos. This is not a unique image. It fits seamlessly within a series of similar scenes in the crypt, all illustrating aspects of Egyptian cosmology and the nightly regeneration of the sun god. So how do we reconcile these two wildly different readings? The answer lies in a powerful cognitive phenomenon known as pareidolia. This is our brain's tendency to perceive familiar patterns, especially faces or objects, in random or ambiguous stimuli. We see a man in the moon, animals in clouds, and when looking at ancient art, modern technology in symbolic forms, our contemporary worldview, saturated with the imagery of science and engineering, becomes the filter through which we interpret the past. We project our own understanding of how light is made onto a culture that understood light as a divine, living force. The Dendera relief controversy is a perfect case study in the challenge of historical interpretation. It reminds us that seeing is not always understanding. The ancient artisans carved what they knew, the gods and myths that explained their universe. We, centuries later, see the contours of our own world in their sacred shapes. This does not diminish the ingenuity of the Egyptians, but reframes it. Their invention was not the light bulb, but a profound and sophisticated system of symbolic thought, a way to encode complex theological ideas into stone for eternity. The real mystery is not whether they had electricity, but how we so easily mistake their spiritual language for our technical blueprints. The spiritual language of the Dendera crypt gives way to a different kind of marvel, one carved not from stone but from bronze and driven not by myth but by pure, elegant mechanics. In ancient China, during the era of the Three Kingdoms, a legendary device was said to guide armies through the most disorienting conditions. This was the south-pointing chariot. It was not a compass that sensed magnetic fields. It was something far more ingenious, a machine that remembered direction through a symphony of interlocking gears. Imagine a ceremonial chariot drawn by horses with a central figure on top, perhaps a celestial being or a symbolic hand, always extending its arm toward the south. The chariot could turn left, right, or even complete a full circle, yet through some unseen magic, the figure on top would slowly, steadily rotate in the opposite direction, cancelling out every turn to keep its pointer aimed true. The magic was pure mathematics made physical. Inside the chariot's housing was a brilliant arrangement of differential gears. This is a system where the motion of two inputs determines the motion of a single output. In this case, the inputs were the rotations of the two wheels on either side of the chariot. When the chariot moved in a straight line, both wheels turned at the same rate, and the gears kept the figure stationary, pointing forward. But when the chariot turned, the wheels would rotate at different speeds. The outside wheel in a turn covers more ground than the inside wheel. This difference in rotation was captured by the gear train. The complex set of gears precisely calculated this difference and translated it into a counter-rotation for the figure on top. If the chariot turned 90 degrees to the west, the gears would command the figure to rotate 90 degrees to the east, maintaining its constant southern orientation. This was mechanical computation in its purest form, a physical feedback control system that operated without any electronic sensors or software. It was a machine that could, in a sense, think about geometry and correct itself in real time. The historical records describe these chariots being presented to emperors as wonders of engineering and used in processions to demonstrate imperial sophistication. While the earliest surviving detailed designs come from later centuries, the principle was understood and implemented remarkably early. To have a working model of a differential gear system, a concept foundational to modern automotive engineering, operating nearly 2 millennia ago, is staggering. It represents a path of technological development entirely separate from the West, one where complex problem-solving was expressed through exquisite machinery. The south-pointing chariot stands not as a tool for navigation, which was likely done by more practical means, but as a testament to a civilization's desire to master abstract principle through tangible craft. It was a clockwork brain that solved a spatial problem, a silent, rolling computer that kept its bearing long before the world had a word for the science it embodied. The chariot's gears solved for direction with mechanical certainty, a puzzle of motion made clear. But in a library vault at Yale University rests a book that offers no such clarity, only a deeper, more profound silence. This is the Voynich manuscript. It is a small, dense codex, about 240 pages of delicate vellum, carbon dated to the early 15th century in Europe. Its physical form is unremarkably medieval, but open it and you enter a world that defies every convention of its time. Every single word, from the elegant cursive on its first page to the cramped notes in its margins, is written in an unknown script. An alphabet of strange, fluid characters that has never been seen anywhere else on Earth. This text, which some call Voynichese, is not a simple substitution cipher. It follows complex linguistic patterns with word structures and repetitions that suggest a real, structured language, yet one that remains completely impenetrable. The words are a wall, but the images are a window into a bewildering mind. The manuscript is lavishly illustrated with paintings in greens, blues, and reds. You see pages of impossible plants, hybrids with bulbous roots and leaves that belong to no known botanical family. There are circular diagrams of zodiac signs, populated by tiny nude figures bathing in interconnected tubes and pools that resemble an archaic plumbing system. Most haunting are the biological sections, showing clusters of small, plump women, each immersed up to their necks in what looks like green, liquid-filled vessels, connected by intricate networks of channels. The overall impression is of a scientific or medical treatise from a parallel universe, a meticulous record of a reality that never existed. For over a century, since its rediscovery by a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich in 1912, the world's top cryptographers, linguists, and historians have tried to break its code. Military codebreakers from both world wars, armed with early computers, applied their finest analytical tools. They found nothing. The text resists every form of frequency analysis and pattern recognition that works on known languages. This failure has spawned a garden of theories. Some propose it is an elaborate, meaningless hoax, crafted to fool a Renaissance nobleman out of a fortune, a nonsensical text generated by a clever cipher device to mimic language without conveying meaning. Others argue it is an encoded herbal, written in a rare, extinct language, perhaps a dialect of Nahuatl or a lost Asian tongue with the pictures as a key to its cipher. There are more speculative ideas that it represents a stream of consciousness from a person experiencing altered states, or records of a forgotten, esoteric system of knowledge. The truth is, we may never know. The Voynich manuscript's mystery is not one of damaged fragments or lost context. It is a complete, beautifully preserved book that sits in plain sight, shouting its secrets in a voice we cannot hear. It represents the ultimate informational technology puzzle, a locked box of knowledge from the past that our most advanced analytical technology cannot pick open. It stands as a humbling reminder that the past can preserve not just answers but perfect, elegant questions, and that some dialogues across time remain a conversation of silence. While the Voynich manuscript presents an indecipherable world of text and image, another ancient text offers a startlingly clear and practical guide to a different kind of transformation, one of flesh and healing. In the fertile plains of ancient India, around 600 years before the Common Era, a physician named Sushruta compiled a medical encyclopedia of breathtaking scope and detail, the Sushruta Samhita. Within its pages, among thousands of entries on anatomy, diagnosis, and herbal medicine, lies a section that seems to leap centuries ahead of its time, a systematic manual for reconstructive surgery. This was not emergency battlefield medicine, but a deliberate, ethical craft to restore form and function, born from a society that valued both physical wholeness and personal dignity. The text details procedures for repairing injuries, particularly to the face, that were common in a society where judicial punishments or injuries in battle could lead to disfigurement. One of its most famous and intricate descriptions is for rhinoplasty, the reconstruction of the nose. The text guides the surgeon through each precise step. First, the physician would take a living flap of skin, still partially attached to maintain its blood supply, from the patient's own forehead or cheek. This flap, carefully measured and shaped, would then be twisted and grafted onto the remaining stump of the nose. To allow the patient to breathe during the delicate healing process, 2 polished tubes, likely made from reed or wood, would be inserted into the nostrils. The text even describes the ideal post-operative care, advising the use of gentle powders and ointments to aid healing and reduce scarring. But the manual's sophistication goes far beyond technical steps. It provides a complete ethical framework for the surgeon. The ideal candidate for surgery is described in detail, considering their overall health and mental readiness. The text emphasizes the need for a clean, well-lit operating theater for sterilized instruments, and for the surgeon to have practiced extensively on models, such as fruits and clay pots, before ever touching a human patient. It speaks to a holistic understanding that the success of the procedure depended not just on skill, but on environment, preparation, and compassionate care. This was medicine as a systematic science, with reconstructive surgery as one of its most advanced branches. The fact that these techniques were being formally documented and taught over 2.5 millennia ago reframes our entire timeline of medical history. It reveals a culture where the repair of complex facial injuries was not a rare, experimental art, but a standardized, teachable discipline. The legacy of Sushruta's work is not lost. It traveled along trade routes, influencing medical traditions across Asia and eventually informing modern plastic and reconstructive surgery. The ancient text stands as a profound testament to a different kind of human ingenuity, one directed not at conquering nature or building monuments, but at the gentle, precise art of restoration, offering a second chance at wholeness to those who had lost it. Sushruta's work was a map of the human body, a guide to repair written on palm leaves. But on a different continent, another ancient culture chose a different kind of canvas, one so vast it could only be read by the sky itself. Stretching across the arid plains of southern Peru, the Nazca Lines are a gallery of giants, etched into the dark, sun-baked desert pavement by the careful removal of reddish surface stones to reveal the lighter earth beneath. These geoglyphs form a breathtaking array of forms. There are hummingbirds with wingspans wider than a jetliner, a spider over 150 feet long, a monkey with an intricately coiled tail, and a whale swimming in a sea of stone. Alongside these biomorphic figures are vast geometric shapes, miles-long straight lines, trapezoids, and spirals that march across the desert floor with ruler-straight precision. Their scale is the first overwhelming mystery. From ground level, they appear as shallow grooves or indistinct pathways. Their full, majestic form is only comprehensible from a vantage point hundreds of feet in the air, a perspective the Nazca people themselves could never physically achieve. This fact has, for decades, fueled sensational speculation about ancient astronauts or lost technologies. But to focus on that is to miss the true human genius of their creation. These were not landing strips for visitors from the stars. They were a monumental, centuries-long project of faith, astronomy, and social coordination, an invention not of machines but of collective human will applied to landscape. The engineering feat itself is a testament to sophisticated, low-tech ingenuity. The Nazca artists, working between 500 before the Common Era and 500 after, used simple surveying tools. They likely employed long ropes anchored by stakes to trace their immense circles and straight lines. They understood perspective and scaling, possibly using small-scale models to plot the enormous final designs. The stable, windless climate of the desert acted as a perfect preservative, but the initial act of creation required moving thousands of tons of stone by hand, following a master plan that had to be executed with perfect fidelity across generations. This points to a deep, shared cultural purpose. The prevailing scholarly view sees the lines not as messages for the sky, but as sacred pathways for rituals connected to the earth and the heavens. Many of the lines align with the rising and setting points of the sun, moon, and significant stars at key times of the year, particularly the solstices. The animal figures are linked to fertility and water, precious resources in the desert. The act of walking these lines, of performing ceremonies along the body of a giant spider or hummingbird, may have been a way to commune with the deities believed to control rain and agricultural cycles. They were a ritual landscape, a kind of outdoor temple where the ceremony was the movement through the design itself. This reframes their creation from a puzzle about altitude to a revelation about organization. To coordinate the labor, feed the workers, and pass the precise plans from one generation to the next required a level of social structure and project management that is itself a profound invention. The Nazca Lines are a testament to what a society can achieve when it shares a unified vision, turning an entire plateau into a canvas for their cosmology. They are a reminder that the greatest inventions are sometimes not objects you can hold, but ideas you can walk within, etched not on parchment but on the very skin of the earth. The Antikythera mechanism is a solitary masterpiece, but a masterpiece cannot exist in a vacuum. An object of such staggering complexity, with its precisely cut bronze gears and calibrated astronomical scales, is not the product of a lone genius working in isolation. It is the pinnacle of a craft, the ultimate expression of a tradition. This single device pulled from the sea implies an entire lost world of mechanical knowledge, a Hellenistic culture that was peering over the edge into a mechanical age. Think of the skills required. Someone had to mine and smelt the copper and tin, alloy them into a workable bronze. Others had to devise methods for cutting teeth into gears at exact angles, ensuring they would mesh smoothly under tension. A mathematician had to translate the irregular motions of planets into a gear ratio, a problem of celestial kinematics. An artisan had to inscribe tiny, accurate Greek lettering onto brass dials. This points to workshops, to apprentices learning from masters, to a sustained investment in precision engineering for intellectual, not just military, purposes. We have a tantalizing literary hint that this was not unique. The Roman orator Cicero, writing in the 1st century before the Common Era, mentions two devices that sound eerily similar. He writes of an instrument built by Archimedes that could model the motions of the sun, moon, and 5 planets. He also describes a celestial globe constructed by Posidonius, which showed the heavens and their daily rotations. These are not vague myths, they are references from an educated Roman to known philosophical instruments. They suggest that the Antikythera mechanism was perhaps the finest surviving example of a known class of objects, philosophical toys or demonstration models for the wealthy and learned. So what happened? Why did this bright path of intricate mechanics fade into darkness for 1,000 years? The answer lies in the brutal pivot of history. The Hellenistic world that produced this device was one of wealthy, rival kingdoms funding scholarship and luxury. But this world was consumed by the rise of Rome, a civilization whose genius lay in law, administration, and monumental engineering on a grand scale, not in delicate philosophical clockwork. The libraries like Alexandria suffered damage and gradual decline. The social and economic structures that supported such specialized, non-utilitarian craftsmanship fragmented. The knowledge passed down in small, elite circles simply evaporated. The gears stopped turning. The Antikythera mechanism, therefore, is more than an ancient computer. It is a ghost of a road not taken, a glimpse of a potential timeline where the mechanical revolution might have begun not in 18th century Europe, but in the workshops of the ancient Mediterranean. It represents a flowering of a particular kind of science, one that sought to build models of the cosmos, to hold the logic of the heavens in your hands. That this path was so thoroughly lost, that such sophistication could vanish so completely, is one of history's most profound and haunting silences. It asks us to consider how fragile the threads of progress truly are, and how much brilliance can be swallowed by the tides of time. That single cup glowing in a museum case is not a fluke of nature, but a testament to a controlled, repeatable craft. While the initial discovery of how metals behaved in glass may have been a fortunate accident, the existence of multiple surviving pieces of dichroic Roman glass proves something far more significant. These artisans did not simply stumble upon a beautiful mistake and then lose the recipe. They observed the effect, they understood the conditions that created it, and they learned to reproduce it on demand. This moves the Lycurgus Cup from the realm of a lucky artifact into the domain of a true technology, however specialized it may have been. It represents a form of empirical material science, a process of experimentation and refinement passed down through workshops. They could not see the nanoparticles they were creating. They had no concept of atoms or plasmon resonance. Yet, through meticulous control of their ingredients, the fineness of their metal powders, the temperature of their furnaces, and the timing of their cooling, they were systematically manipulating matter at a scale invisible to the human eye. They were following a recipe for a specific visual outcome, a recipe that depended entirely on processes occurring at the nanoscale. This is a staggering conceptual leap. It suggests a mindset that was comfortable with cause and effect at a level of abstraction we associate with modern chemistry. They accepted that by combining certain materials in a certain way, under certain conditions, they could achieve a magical, transformative property in the final product. They were not just making glass, they were engineering its interaction with light itself. This proto-industrial process for nanoscale manipulation sat quietly in their workshops for centuries, a secret embedded in luxury objects, its full implications completely hidden even from the masters who wielded it. It would be 1,600 years before scientists, armed with electron microscopes, could finally see what the Roman glassmakers had been building all along, and begin to formalize the principles those artisans had found through fire, patience, and an artist's relentless pursuit of beauty. The most advanced invention is meaningless if its secret dies with its creator. This is a haunting thread woven through our journey, the mystery of lost formulas. Some technologies vanish in a deliberate whisper, others in the roar of collapsing worlds. Consider the stark contrast between two of our marvels. Greek fire and Damascus steel were both products of intense, guarded mastery. Their recipes were not public knowledge but closely held state or guild secrets, protected with a ferocity that matched their value. The formula for Greek fire was so vital to Byzantine survival that its composition was likely known only to a select few, perhaps a single family. When Constantinople finally fell, that intimate, oral tradition was extinguished forever. Similarly, the exact process for forging true Wootz steel into a Damascus blade, the specific fold patterns, the magical cooling cycles, was a symphony known only to the master smiths. As trade routes shifted, as empires fell, and as those masters passed without apprentices worthy of the secret, the symphony's score was lost. We are left with only the echo of its performance in the surviving blades. In these cases, the how was deliberately obscured, a candle snuffed out by design or by the fragility of human lineage. Then there is a different kind of loss, one not of the recipe but of the reason. The Romans used their phenomenal concrete for centuries. They had a reliable, repeatable formula using pozzolana ash and lime. They knew it worked magnificently, building harbors that defied the sea. But they did not know why it worked. They had no concept of the self-healing nanostructures, the slow chemical conversation between seawater and silica that actually strengthened their peers over time. For them, it was a brilliant empirical result. The how to make it was transmitted, but the deep why it works was a silent, unseen process. The knowledge was functional, not foundational. When the social and economic structures that supported large-scale Roman engineering crumbled, even the functional recipe faded from common use because the underlying science had never been written down in a way that could survive the Dark Ages. The principle lay dormant, waiting for a future civilization with electron microscopes to rediscover and explain what the Romans had only accomplished. This reveals a profound truth about technology itself. It is not a single spark of discovery, but a sustained flame. That flame depends on a continuous, living chain of transmission. It needs scribes to write it down, teachers to explain it, apprentices to practice it, and a society that values it enough to keep the fuel coming. A breakthrough can be a solitary event, a moment of genius in a workshop or a library. But for that breakthrough to become a technology, to jump from a wonder to a tool that shapes civilization, it must be replicated, taught, and integrated into the fabric of daily life. When that chain is broken, by war, by secrecy, by the loss of a language, or simply by a shift in what a culture deems important, the technology can vanish as if it never was. The Antikythera mechanism implies a whole school of gear-making that left no other trace. The quipu knots held a language that died with the quipu. These are not just lost objects, they are severed connections in a vast, ancient network of knowledge. So these ancient inventions ahead of their time present us with a dual legacy. They are triumphs of human ingenuity, yes, but they are also monuments to the fragility of progress. They remind us that our own technological civilization is not a permanent edifice, but a story we are constantly telling and retelling to each new generation. The real invention, perhaps, is not the gear or the glass or the steel, but the will to keep the knowledge alive, to pass the flame carefully from one hand to the next across the uncertain centuries. A machine is more than its gears and wires. It is a conversation with the world it is born into. We have marveled at objects that seem to defy their era, but to truly understand them, we must ask a different kind of question. Why did they stop? Why did the brilliant path they illuminated suddenly go dark, leaving the world to wait centuries to find it again? The answer often lies not in a failure of engineering, but in a mismatch of context. An invention can be perfect in principle, yet remain a curiosity because the society around it has no pressing need for what it does. Take Hero's steam engine, the whirling sphere that demonstrated the power of pressurized vapor. The physics were sound, the craftsmanship was possible, yet it spun in idleness, a temple wonder. Why was it never hooked to a millstone or a pump? The ancient Mediterranean economy was built on a foundation of abundant human and animal labor. The economic incentive to replace that labor with a complex, fuel-hungry machine simply did not exist. There was no coal-driven industrial revolution demanding more efficient power. No network of deep mines flooding with water that needed urgent pumping. The engine was an answer, but its world had not yet learned to ask the question. The Baghdad Battery presents a quieter, perhaps more poignant version of this disconnect. If it was indeed a primitive galvanic cell, it produced a faint, mysterious trickle of energy. What could that trickle do in a world without a concept of electrical circuits, without light bulbs or motors? It might plate a tiny trinket with gold or produce a tingle for a religious rite, but without a larger framework of electrical theory, without a society that craved portable power or instant communication, that trickle led nowhere. It was a cul-de-sac of potential. The battery did not fail. The application for its unique gift never materialized. This is the subtle tragedy of being ahead of your time. You are speaking a language no one else yet understands. Your invention is not a tool waiting to be used. It is a riddle waiting for its question. This principle extends beyond single artifacts to entire technological systems. The quipu of the Inca was a flawless data storage system for a vast, centralized bureaucracy. But when that empire fell, the intricate language of knots lost its reason for being. The system was perfectly adapted to its specific social and political context, and when that context vanished, the technology faded into obscurity. It was not inferior to writing, it was exquisitely tailored to a world that no longer existed. Similarly, the advanced surgical tools of Rome served a medical tradition with trained practitioners and clean hospitals. As that organized tradition fragmented in later centuries, the specialized knowledge required to use those tools eroded, and they became relics rather than instruments. The technology survived in the ground, but the ecosystem of knowledge that gave it meaning had collapsed. So when we hold an ancient marvel, we are holding two histories. One is the history of human genius, the spark of insight that saw a new way to bend metal, mix glass, or calculate the stars. The other, quieter history is the story of the world that received that spark. Did it land on dry tinder, ready to catch fire and spread? Or did it land on stone, gleaming brightly for a moment before fading, a solitary testament to an idea whose time had not yet come? Being ahead of time, then, is not just a measure of technical sophistication. It is a measure of loneliness. It is the story of a brilliant solution in search of a problem that the age has not yet felt acutely enough to solve. The artifact endures, whispering of a parallel timeline, a road not taken because the society that built it turned down a different path. That loneliness, that gap between a brilliant object and its time, is precisely where our story finds its most hopeful turn. The silence of these artifacts is not permanent. In laboratories, workshops, and digital spaces around the world, a remarkable conversation has begun. Modern science is not just studying these ancient marvels as relics, it is actively engaging with them as partners in innovation, asking them new questions and listening for answers that can shape our own future. This is no longer a one-way look into the past, but a dynamic dialogue across the centuries. Take the Roman concrete that has baffled engineers for so long. For decades, we admired its durability as a historical curiosity. Now, materials scientists are in a race to decode its secret, not out of mere academic interest, but with an urgent, practical goal. By analyzing the chemical nanostructures that give the concrete its self-healing properties, researchers are attempting to create a new generation of building materials. Imagine infrastructure that can sense its own tiny cracks and trigger a chemical process to seal them, much like a living organism healing a wound. Bridges, seawalls, and even nuclear containment structures built with such technology would be safer, longer lasting, and drastically reduce the immense environmental and financial cost of constant repairs. The ancient Roman recipe, born of empirical mastery, is providing the blueprint for a sustainable construction revolution. This dialogue is equally vibrant in the realm of intricate machinery. The Antikythera mechanism, that corroded lump of bronze, has found new life in the hands of modern engineers. Using advanced X-ray imaging and painstaking craftsmanship, teams have constructed multiple working replicas. These are not just museum displays, they are profound experiments. By building the device gear by precise gear, researchers test their theories about its exact functions. They feel the resistance of the bronze. They observe how the calculated ratios translate into the slow dance of pointers across dials. This hands-on replication is a form of reverse engineering across 2 millennia, a way to step into the minds of the original makers and understand not just what they built but how they thought. Each successful model confirms the staggering sophistication of Hellenistic engineering and closes a little more of that historical silence. The conversation extends even to artifacts whose original use we can only guess. Archaeologists now employ tools like three-dimensional scanning and modeling to understand ancient tools in ways never before possible. They can create perfect digital copies of a delicate surgical instrument from Pompeii, then use software to simulate how it was held, how much force it could withstand, and what kinds of marks it would leave on bone or tissue. This virtual experimentation allows them to test hypotheses about surgical techniques without damaging priceless originals. Similarly, 3D models of mysterious objects, like certain carved stone artifacts whose purpose is unknown, can be shared instantly with experts worldwide, crowdsourcing the puzzle solving across disciplines. A geologist might see a weathering pattern an archaeologist missed. An engineer might recognize a stress point for a specific function. This collaborative, technological scrutiny turns every artifact into an open question posed to the global scientific community. So these ancient inventions, once lonely ahead of their time, are now finding their moment. They are no longer endpoints but starting points. The lost formula for Damascus steel challenges modern metallurgists to recreate its legendary nanostructures, potentially leading to stronger, more flexible alloys. The principles behind the south-pointing chariot's differential gears, understood intuitively centuries ago, now underpin the stability control systems in every modern automobile. This ongoing work reframes the entire narrative. We are not simply uncovering lost genius, we are collaborating with it. The past is speaking, and we are finally equipped with the tools and the curiosity to listen, to learn, and to build upon its whispers. The gap of centuries is closing, not because we have caught up to their past, but because their ingenuity is actively helping to shape our future. So these artifacts are more than a list of curiosities, they are a powerful argument against a simple story. We often imagine history as a steady, upward march from simple to complex, from ignorance to knowledge. But the journey through these 30 inventions paints a very different picture, one of a brilliant, flickering constellation. Human progress is not a smooth, rising line. It is a landscape of towering peaks separated by deep valleys, of isolated genius that flares into being and then, for reasons we may never fully know, fades back into the quiet of time. The Antikythera mechanism was not a stepping stone to something greater in its own era. It was a summit, a lonely peak of mechanical astronomy that would not be climbed again for over 1,000 years. The self-healing concrete of the Romans was a pinnacle of materials science that crumbled into legend, its principles lying dormant until our own age chose to look for them. These are not failures of invention, but evidence of a non-linear, unpredictable path. The true value of these marvels is not in fueling fantasies of ancient astronauts or lost super-civilizations. That search for external saviors misses the profound human truth at the core of every artifact. Each one, from the Damascus steel blade to the knotted cords of the quipu, is a testament to the boundless, innate potential of the human mind when it is deeply engaged with the world around it. They show us people observing a problem, a material, or a celestial pattern, and applying relentless curiosity and craft to understand it, to master it, or to represent it. They solve the problems of their time with the tools and concepts available to them, sometimes achieving results so elegant they feel alien to our own timeline. This reframes our entire relationship with the past. We are not looking back at primitive ancestors, but at intellectual peers who simply lived in a different chapter of the very long human story. Their context was different, their priorities were different, but their capacity for insight and innovation was every bit as formidable as our own, and this leads to a humbling and thrilling thought for our own moment. We live in an age we consider explosively innovative, defined by artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and quantum computing. But from the vantage point of 500 or 1,000 years from now, how will our breakthroughs be viewed? Which of our proudest inventions will seem like obvious precursors, and which will appear as bizarre, isolated flashes of insight, brilliant solutions that were somehow out of step with their era, waiting for a future civilization to rediscover their purpose? The possibility invites a new kind of curiosity about our own time. It asks us to look at the technologies we take for granted and wonder which ones are truly woven into the fabric of the future and which are dazzling cul-de-sacs. As we close this exploration, we turn the question to you. Which of these 30 ancient inventions most reshaped your understanding of the past? Was it the cosmic calculator pulled from the sea, the unrusting iron sentinel of Delhi, or the surgeon's delicate tools preserved in ash? Share the one that most amazed you in the comments below, and let us continue the conversation across the centuries.